First of all, this is extremely weird being down here. We don't do this in business. We do it a lot around conference tables. So feel free to yell at me, heckle me. We'll figure this out. So my name is Keisha Mohan. I'm Executive Vice President and Legal Advisor to a company called BizLab. We're an operating company, and we own and operate a bunch of businesses. So we have an investment bank, a software company, a reseller organization, and an internet marketing company. And there's sort of 8 of us in the exec team, and we parachute in and run all these companies. Okay, so that's the professional background here. Let me tell you why I'm here. When I was a law student, I was getting increasingly frustrated with a lot of the speakers that were coming to speak at our institution. Okay, and what I often found was we'd get these high-profile speakers who would come and kind of land from Mount Olympus and talk to us and not give us any actual information, right? And so what I found was there was a misalignment of incentives between what the university was looking to do and what I wanted to do. And the misalignment was this. If you get a chance to get a Supreme Court justice to come to your law school, you don't really care what they talk about. Because from the university's perspective, really the brand value is just saying we had a Supreme Court justice, as opposed to, is that information valuable to my life and is it actionable, right? So I often found this at conferences as well. It was more important to get a high profile speaker than to provide actionable information for the conference participants. And so I came up with a phrase for these talks, which I call TBU, which is true but useless, right? So I had a lot of kind of talks that were true but useless, and that frustrated me. It especially frustrated me because I came to law school and was a lawyer by accident. So I sort of floated into law school, was there, I was not prepared to enter the legal profession at all, and was really interested in business, and I'd come from the nonprofit world. So law school and the legal profession was totally new to me. So that's why I'm here. An entrepreneur kind of solves a problem that exists. My hope here today is to kind of give you actionable information, the opposite of TBU, for you to find a job outside of the legal profession. If I could come up with a more official title for this, I would call it just pure hustling, but that doesn't sound fancy, and it probably doesn't have the same agency or grace as how to use your GAD outside of the legal profession. So here's my hope. Give me a couple minutes. Let me get through my entire talk. It's extremely short, and then we'll jump into questions. And what I want to do is answer anything that you guys want to talk about, whether it's what I talk about or not. Okay, so the focus is on you today. So anything you need to know, they say that smart people learn from experience and wise people learn from other people's experience. So take advantage of my mistakes and then run with them, right? So let me talk about 3 phases. The first is, if you're interested in going to a profession outside of the legal profession, you want to think about what you're going to do in school, what you're going to do to get a job, and then what you're going to do after you actually get the job, okay? Which is a phase that I think many people miss when they're doing this rubric. So the first thing is when you're looking at your, how many 1Ls do we have here? Okay, so a lot. Okay, great. Most people, when you look at your education, and this is something you did in undergrad and middle school, the way you judge your education is information acquisition. Okay, so you think about what are the facts that I want to know. And what I would argue to you today is that that's actually the least efficient way to judge your education. So let me hopefully give you a better rubric, all right? So what I would encourage you to do is first judge knowledge. And the way to do that is by standard is that knowledge going to have future potential value to you? So let me give you an example that we were just talking about. I'm really interested in common law. I think it's a fascinating discipline. But the truth is the vast majority of litigation attorneys barely practice common law, and no mergers and acquisition attorneys practice common law. So the value of that knowledge to my future career when I was going through my legal education was very low. And so I knew that going in, that I was doing it just purely out of interest as opposed to something that I could apply to the future profession, right? The second thing, and this is sort of the dark secret of education at all levels, is that knowledge atrophies. A more plain English way to say it is you forget most of the stuff that you learn, okay? And the easiest way to test that is if I gave you a calc test or an AP history test, you probably would fail it, all right? And that's okay. This has to do with how the brain takes information and retains it. So you need to go through your education knowing you're gonna forget most of the stuff that you learn, and that's just the way the brain works. So what's a better rubric? And I would argue to you that a better way to choose your courses and experiences and who you associate with is not knowledge acquisition, but skills acquisition. Okay, so you wanna think through what are the skills that you want when you go into the real world? And that's a totally different way to look at your educational experience, right? Now there are kind of skills you can get in school and there are skills you can get out of school. Here are the ones I would argue you should really focus on getting in school, especially if you're a 1L. And here are some of the places that I made a mistake and didn't focus on as deeply as I should have. I think the first is you really need to learn how to build and maintain relationships. If you do not know how to do this, if you don't have a mentor that teaches you how to target people that you want to build relationships with, how to do the first favor, how to hold events that you bring them to, how to encourage them to help you in your career, how to help them. If someone hasn't taught you how to do this stuff, you're wasting time. All right, so you need to go find a mentor to teach you how to build relationships. If there's a course, take it. And what you guys have here at Yale is such a great platform as students to reach out to people and practice, right? So it's not just enough to like meet someone great. You need to have that relationship. And the biggest lesson here is you need to build your network before you need it. Especially that's something I would pass on to the 1Ls is if you're interested in a job outside the legal profession, this is the time where you kind of do an analysis of who are the people that can help you get a job when you get out, and you start making friends with them. It's that simple, okay? So if you're not good at that, and you should go find a mentor, and you'll find a lot of people who are good at that. Just ask them to teach you. There's a whole bunch of things you can learn. I'll give you an example. I had a great mentor who told me one of the easiest ways to build a relationship is to have events that people want to come to, okay, to solve a need. So what do people want to do? They want to meet other interesting people outside of their industry. Okay, so let me give you an example of what I started to do. So I was talking to a lot of private equity guys, venture capitalists, startups, nonprofits, government, and they were all telling me the same story, which is they love meeting interesting people, but they hate going to something with an agenda. They hate sitting through speeches, they hate sitting at dinner next to two people who are not interesting. What they want is mobility and the freedom to talk to people and the ability to interact with people outside of their profession, right? So I was talking to Joe Bailey, he's the former CEO of the Miami Dolphins. He can get to anybody in sports. He doesn't need me to do that. But he's interested in meeting startups and venture capitalists, because that's not his world. And so what I started doing was, I started booking baseball suites and basketball suites around the country, get a bunch of tickets, and I would just invite people from different worlds and get the hell out of the way, right? So the idea was just like bring them in, let them interact. And that was a great way for me to do the first favor for folks, right? Just come to an event, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to pay for anything, meet a whole bunch of interesting people, and then go out of there with kind of a good taste in your mouth. And I know that I can kind of call those people if I need to, right? So if you don't have someone teaching you how to build relationships, like now's the time to learn. And I sort of had to learn this on the fly, starting with 2L, 3L, and kind of working my way through my career. The second thing is if you're not good at process design, you should learn how to do that. And let me give you a very simple example. You go through different routines on your day-to-day life. You answer email, you write documents, you type, right? Everything down to logistics. So you need to get better at process design, okay? And basically what that is, can you effectively and efficiently execute different processes and routines? Because at the end of the day, work is about logistics. And so if you're good at that, you're gonna be far ahead of any other candidate. If you're not sure if you're good at process design, great way to do it is just examine how you tackle your inbox. So I'll give you a couple tips, right? If you use Outlook, you need to use quick text, which is basically a huge way to do control and paste. The equivalent in Gmail is canned responses, yes, where. So that's a fast way to process your email. So I use Dragon Natural Speak to talk on my emails, and I process them 5 times faster than anybody else. I know I've hacked my phone, so I can throw phrases down there. So you need to learn this stuff. And email is a great way to test like your ability to implement systems to make your life more efficient, all right? The third thing, and no one wants to talk about it, and it's one of the most important things, is you need to learn how to do financials. So if you don't know what a balance sheet is or cash flow statement, it's time to learn. Okay, so I come from the startup world, that's where I interact with a lot of people. Financials for a startup CEO are about 1/3 of where they spend their time. And when you get to a public company, it gets even bigger. Okay, now there's a couple key things you need to look for in financials. If you're looking at projections, you need to skip straight to the assumptions. That's how you judge projections. And if you're looking at financials, you need to look at the footnotes. Okay, it's really important to see what's there, and you'll know you're really good at financials when you can tell what's missing. A lot of people are bad at financials. Now, whatever world you go into, nonprofit, media, you're gonna deal with money, and so you need to understand how the financial statements are put together. What you're gonna find is a lot of people put together financial statements that are not according to any standard known by any accounting association, right? So the head of my internet marketing company just came to me and he just threw me like 17 Excel spreadsheets, totally disorganized, with numbers that he put together because he had no financial training. But my job is to try and parse through that, put it together in a way that makes sense and tells a true story of business. So ultimately, financials tell you how the business is doing and where the problems are. You really need to learn time management. So this is a skill that you can learn here. Let me give you my 3 categories for time management. It's not just being on time, that's only the first category. It's time spent, so are you using time effectively? For example, do you know how to run meetings efficiently? And then it's time imposed. And I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is they kind of impose on other people's time. They're very inconsiderate, and it's unprofessional. Okay, and so the best example here, and I go back to email just because it has such a large impact on our lives, is email is about call and response. So when you send an email, you're thinking about the imposition on the other person for that response. And the worst emails are sort of chain emails, right? The sort of boomerang effect that goes through a whole bunch of people and uses a lot of time. So time imposed is something you need to study. And again, if you don't know where to find this, I'm happy to give you resources, talk you through systems we have. One of the rubrics that I give all the folks in our company, so we have about 225 people across the entire industry, is to think of your life in 3 phases: automate, delegate, and efficiently execute. So I sometimes do, kind of consulting for people who need time management effectiveness. So what are the routines in your life that you can automate? If you can't automate, what are the ones you can efficiently execute? Or excuse me, you can delegate. So do you know how to use virtual assistants? Do you know how to pass off and parse off work to other people? And then whatever's left, do you know how to efficiently execute it? And so an interesting exercise for people who are willing to kind of put in the time and energy is take a week and map out your entire life in 15-minute increments. And then look at the 15-minute increments and start thinking about, what can I automate? What can I delegate? What can I efficiently execute? It's a really hard exercise, but you start realizing all the places you waste time, and it focuses away from kind of the work itself and towards logistics. Again, more interested in typing than the actual content, right? So if you're interested in time management, that's kind of a way to do it. And the final skill that I would say you really need to pick up is writing. So let me be clear, I'm less interested in how you write a legal memo and more interested in how you write emails. So dollars to donuts, you're gonna write a lot more emails than you are legal memos. So what I wanna know is, do you know how to write a short, curt, efficient email that delivers information that I need and nothing else? So is it everything I need and nothing I don't? So if you're not good at writing short emails, it's time to learn how to do that. And I'll give you a lesson I learned, is that the more I talk to CEOs of public companies, Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, the shorter their emails get. So a lot of times they're answering, on their BlackBerry/iPhone/Droid, and they're just about efficient execution and delivery of information. So you need to learn that. I think one of the things that's not taught in law school, and what I struggle with, is this efficient delivery of information in an email. And a lot of people write kind of lengthy prose that often got lost in cyberspace. And candidly, I found out later that a lot of the management, contacts, network people I reached out to didn't even read long emails. They refused to. So efficient writing is something that is a skill you should pick up here while you still can. Okay, so there are other skills you want to learn, right, that you probably can't learn here. One example I'll give you is leadership, right? So everybody talks about leadership. Let me give you my read on leadership. Anybody can be a leader when it's sunny outside. True leaders come out in the rain. Okay, so you don't really learn how to be a good leader until you face problems. So if there's skills like that, what you should do is put them down on a one-page document. And then when you think about your next ideal position, reverse engineer from that skill set. Okay, so for me, I wanted to learn leadership of a small team of 20 to 50 people, and I wanted to do it at a company where if I screwed up, I would not end up on the front page of the New York Times, right? So that was like the skill and ideal job that I put together. So again, you take the skills that you're interested in, reverse engineer a potential position from there, and then the next step, and this is what I encourage all my kind of mentees to do, is look at all the companies that have positions open that are similar to what you're looking for. So what you do is you take this job search away from farming and make it more about hunting, right? Specific things that you're trying to go after. Now, what I think is extremely valuable in that process is now when you take a one-page document and you've thought through your career and you've thought through skills acquisitions you want to get at your first job, you can take that document and you can give it to your alumni network, to your career center, to folks like me, to your friends, and you give them a really specific, actionable target. So what I tell my guys is I'll go to war for anybody who wants to go war for themselves, but if you just come to me and say, like, I need a job, you're not really helping me move the ball. You're actually asking me to do a lot of work and imposing on kind of a resource-constrained environment, right? Everybody's limited in time, energy, money. But if you say, these are the 5 companies I want to work at, this is exactly the skills I want to gain, and this is the type of position I'm looking for, I can quickly go through my Rolodex and try and find you that job. And a lot of people are going to be happy to help you if you give them specific targets to go after. Okay? So you need to think through, like, what exactly is the job you're looking for. Let me talk you through one of the challenges I find for students who come from kind of high profile institutions, and it's pretty simple to state. You're going to come to a point in your life where you have to decide between residual brand value of a job opportunity versus the skills acquisition. Okay, so let's take a very simple example. It's a chance to go to McKinsey or a small business that doesn't have the same brand value. I would argue, and this is on the fence, and I look forward to discussing this with you. I would argue that when you were faced with that choice, you choose skills acquisition. Okay, so what you're going to find if you talk to a lot of your friends at kind of the name brand institutions, they go to something like Goldman Sachs and they work on the same thing, kind of pushing the same Excel spreadsheet, and they don't gain a lot of skills. Or they go to a small business or a less well-known business, and it's a circus, but they're learning a hell of a lot, right? Now, it's hard. I don't know if there's a right decision there. Like I said, I'm slightly on the fence, sort of 51% on the favor of skills acquisition. But it's really about how you want to build your own professional career. And ultimately, if you learn skills, I think that's going to add better value to your life than the marginal brand value of going to a name brand company after somewhere like Yale Law School, right? So if you go to McKinsey after Yale Law School, is it really adding that much more brand value to your life? That's the choice that you should start thinking through. So let me talk you through really quickly how to nail an interview, right? So especially if you're doing an interview outside the legal profession. When you do an interview for any company, you want to focus on three things. The first is what I call the point of attraction, and that's specific to the interview that you're going after, okay? So you find a company, it's a startup, it's a large company. What is their pain point, and how are you going to solve it? Okay, so I'll give you some examples from my life. In the legal profession, I interviewed at Vincent and Elkins, which is a law firm in, it's kind of a national law firm, but international, excuse me, but they're headquartered in Houston. Their pain point at the time was Islamic finance. So they were looking for people who could talk Islamic finance. And I'd lived in Dubai and worked for the government of Dubai, so I knew that. And so what I led with was, let me tell you what I know about Islamic finance. I don't know everything, but I know a little bit more than the vast majority of people you're going to see, and that was a point of attraction. Okay, so focus on someone's pain point and come up with a specific characteristic, skill, etc. that you have to answer that pain point. The second thing you want to focus on is what I call the point of interest. Everybody's attracted to people that are passionate about something. So don't try and be interesting, just tell them what you're interested in, and people will relate to that, okay? So for me, my point of interest is travel. I've been to all 7 continents, climbed Kilimanjaro, Great Barrier Reef, got attacked by people in Morocco, 50, 60 countries, go around the world, I'm going to 15 in the next 6 months. That's like what I care about. So when I talk about travel, people know that I'm not doing it just to have them be excited about me being in the chair in front of them. It's something that really, really is important to me and something I go after, right? So you want to have a point of interest. Now, while the point of attraction is specific, the point of interest is general. Okay, so you can talk about point of interest with anybody because it's your passion. Your passion is not going to change regardless of the job opportunity you're going after. The third thing you want to do to nail the interview is to describe a situation where you have been resourceful. Okay, and I'll get to why that's important. And I think the rubric you go into when you look at the interview is, here is the problem we faced. Here are the resources we did not have. And here's how we solved it. Okay? Nobody has everything they need at every time to do anything. Resource constraint is sort of a function of business. It's a function of any industry. And so if you can show how you are resourceful, you're going to be in good stead because you're looking for problem solvers. Everybody's looking for problem solvers. Okay? So, point of attraction that's specific to the organization you're interviewing with, point of interest, it's who you are, and then how to be resourceful. I would argue that, again, that's sort of a general example. If you have a really great example, right? So I talked about my problem I solved was I used to work in prisons in South Africa. And in the prisons, there's a lot of resource depletion. And the only people who are as poor as the prisoners are the prison guards themselves. Okay? So what they did was they set up a black market. So the prisoners' families would come in and they would bring soap and toiletries, and the prison guards would kind of confiscate everything. And then the only thing they would let through was money. And so the prisoners' families would come in, they would give the prisoners money, and the prisoners would have to buy basic toiletries, right? So it was a really hard life. So who am I? I was kind of a no-name kid from New Jersey, but I wanted to solve this issue. And so the solution I came up with was I set up a smuggling operation. So I was in the first aid training program, and we had all these dummies, right? First aid dummies. And I would stuff it with toiletries that I had raised and fundraised through other avenues. I'm gonna get it past the security guard and distribute it to the prisoners. So regardless of what you think about the story and the moral and ethics behind what I just told you, what you understand is that it shows that hopefully I'm resourceful, and that's the point. And so I've gotten more job offers from that particular story where someone says it was just so cool that you solved that problem. So you need that story, okay? Show how you're resourceful. If you don't know what to do with your life, if you're one of those people who's kind of focused on getting the educational honors and getting kind of the next degree, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know what to do, right? I have no idea what skills I want to acquire. I have no idea what's valuable. And I had a lot of friends like this. I was like this at one point. I have a very specific experience that I think is good for anybody in that position, which is to work at a venture-funded startup, okay? So you want to work with an experienced entrepreneur who's gotten a substantial amount of money and is in the growth phase of a company. You don't want to get there when there's kind of fundraising that's extremely arduous and you're not going to learn a lot. But after they have money and runway and experienced entrepreneur, if you go there, you're going to learn so much because all startups need more bodies. And you're going to be just someone who can do anything everywhere because a lot of the paperwork and bureaucracy is just not in place. So it's a chance to kind of touch anything you want. So if you have no idea what you want to do, that's kind of what I would recommend that you do. Okay, so now you've gotten the job, and they often call the maintenance problem is what they call it in politics. So if you talk to someone in DC, they say, we always have this maintenance problem, right? And what they mean is everybody is gearing towards like getting financing or other resources for the photo op, right? So if you're a congressman, you just want to get financing to kind of build a couple hundred jobs in your community, you get the photo op, but no one wants to worry about maintenance because maintenance is boring and you don't get any press for maintenance, right? So what I would encourage all of you to think about is one way to use your JD and your education here is on maintenance, and that's a way to distinguish yourself in that job for your next job, okay? So maintenance is really about three things. Every company has two types of people. They're specialists and they're utility people, okay? Specialists focus on exactly what you're talking about. One thing, HR, finance, management to some extent. Utility people are problem solvers, and they're basically the people that are called in times of crisis. So if you can distinguish yourself as a utility person, as someone who's willing to take anything on at any time and face any problem, you're gonna skyrocket in your professional career. You're gonna have a lot of job opportunities open up to you because the word's gonna get out that when things go wrong, you get the call. And that's valuable, okay? The second thing is, and this is where I found my legal education to be extremely valuable, is the application of rigorous logic to business, okay? If you've been in any sort of business, you find that at any size, at any level, all the way up to kind of the billion-dollar companies, a lot of times there isn't logic. It's just sort of emotion dictating, and someone says, yeah, we should do this, right? And it's not driven by data, it's not driven by analysis. It's just like, oh, well, I hear this is like a great thing to do. So where someone who's been to law school can take their JD and apply it is, look, we need to think this through systematically, and you often kill ideas, right? So you're really negative, but you ultimately save the business from making a lot of bad decisions. And then the final thing I would encourage you to do is don't try and be the best, try and be different. Okay, so one of the ways to distinguish yourself in any company is it's not about going against the grain, it's about being outside of the box that people want to put you in. So I'll give you an example. When I was an attorney, what you're gonna find in the legal world, if you go there, is there's sort of this sea change where associates used to just kind of go and do work. And now major corporate law firms are sort of eating up to the hierarchy of the food chain, are actually asking associates to do business development because everybody's fighting for clients. Rates are going down, stuff's getting outsourced to Europe and China and even farther, or being automated. So I was at my law firm, I was there for about a month, and they were talking about going to conferences where there were other law firms to try and get business, which I thought was insane, right? Like, why would you go where other law firms are to try and get clients? It doesn't make any sense. So what I did after about a month is I started hanging out with entrepreneurs. And I decided I was gonna kind of distinguish myself in the entrepreneur community three ways. The first was I was gonna be the lawyer who just talked to them in plain English, okay? So a lot of times if you are an entrepreneur and you go and meet a lawyer, the first thing you're afraid of is the legal bill. And the second thing you're afraid of is the phrase, it's complicated, right? You want to know if a big legal bill is on the way, just ask someone and they say it's complicated, you know they're going to write you like a huge, huge legal bill. So I said I was going to do the opposite of that. I was going to keep things in plain English. I was going to talk in their language because I come from the entrepreneur space. I was just going to go help them, and if I had to stuff legal bills in places, I was going to do that, okay? So the second thing I did, and I realized there's a huge niche for this, was help startups raise money, right? So startups need money. I mean, it's sort of the nature of the ecosystem. And I realized that major corporate law firms are a huge network and connection between people that have money and people that need money. So what I made it my expertise was to kind of connect people within our network of about 10,000 clients. And you know what? I didn't know anything until I did, right? You raise a little bit here and there. It was 5,000, 50,000, 100,000. And then the big win was I helped an algae company raise $15 million from one of our Japanese clients. So that was how I was different. And so the word got out that I was this guy, this attorney in Milwaukee, which is in any of the startup ecosystems, who actually knew how to help people raise money. Okay? And the third thing I did, and I'm going to say this very fast and then we can delete it from the recording, was I helped companies negotiate legal bills to keep the legal fees down. So I told them all the things they shouldn't pay for and how to negotiate and how to get a flat fee and all that stuff. But again, that was how I was going to distinguish myself. So I was sort of the antithesis of a lawyer, and that's how I added value. And that's what I would encourage you to do, is don't worry about being the best at something, just be different and you'll distinguish yourself in that position. So I'm done with my talk. Hopefully it was fast enough. What do you guys want to talk about? What do you have questions about? What are your concerns, fears, anything? Let's kind of jump into it.
When you talked about automating things in like your daily life, like what kind of stuff? Like what are you talking about in that?
So I'll give you. So I've automated my entire apartment, right? So let me give you examples. So I found like I was wasting a lot of time in the most basic of activities. For example, turning my faucet on and off. So I got like an automatic faucet thing, right? I got tracking my weight over time was becoming a problem, so I got a scale that syncs wirelessly with my network, okay? I study sleep a lot, and so I was curious as like a more efficient way to get sleep. It turns out there are machines that can wirelessly track your sleep and wake you up at your lightest point of sleep, which is the healthiest. I'm happy to tell you more about that stuff. So, you know, it's funny, but think about, you know, simple copy and paste, right? So do you have an iPhone?
Yeah.
Okay, do you use the shortcut feature in the keyboard section? Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, so.
I just switched
Right.
from BlackBerry, so.
All right, so hopefully the most useful thing I tell you today is not this, but if you have an iPhone, you want to pull it out, go to your settings section, and then go to the keyboard section, okay? So settings, general, keyboard. And if you go down, you're gonna see shortcuts.
Wait, I'm not there.
Okay.
Already not. Keyboard, okay.
All right, so you see shortcuts at the bottom?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the genesis of an example of automation. If you're like a lot of people that send a lot of text messages and emails, what you find is a lot of those text messages and emails tend to be the same, okay? They're not the exact same phrase, but they're pretty similar. So if you consolidate those responses into what you would call similar phrases, put it in the shortcut feature, right? So I have a bunch of those. So looking forward to it, for example, I just type LFI in the shortcut function, and it types looking forward to it. So I can process my emails and texts faster than you right now. So that's one example of automation, right? So this is taking like a really boring logistic of your life and making it faster and better.
I like it.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
If
Yeah.
you're a 1L or a 2L right now and you're kind of like 9 weeks into law school,
Yep.
and you realize the law might not be for you and you're kind of freaking out, are all these skills things we can learn while in law school, or should we think seriously about taking classes at Yale SOM or applying to an MBA program full time? Are you confident everything here is something we can learn in the next 2 years?
Yeah, so the answer is no. Okay, but I don't think that's a function of lack of time. I think it's a function of lack of access to classes like that, right? No one teaches you how to process email efficiently because it doesn't get you in a law review, right? So, but the truth is, while people are teaching you how to write a legal memo, this is where I see a disconnect between legal education and actual application. You talk to any corporate attorney, and again, they're interested in, can you write client clean emails? And by that they mean, can you write emails to clients that get them the information they need? If you're an attorney, I know we're talking about outside the legal profession, but clients are pushing back on law firms where they say, we don't want a legal memo, we don't want a ton of analysis, we just want to know the answer. That's where the puck is going. So I think that's one thing that classes need to do. And you know, if I were you, and this is something again I wish I'd done, I should have petitioned my law school to bring in someone to teach us all this stuff, right? Like just teach us how to like effectively write email. Like that's something we need to know. We're going to use a lot more than property law if we're not going into property at all, right? So, you know, I don't know enough about business school. I never went. I've given talks to business school, but I've never actually kind of sat through multiple classes. So I can't tell you if they're teaching this sort of logistical skill set in a way that makes sense.
So what is the value of working for other people? I say that simply because I don't like to do it and I haven't been, and I see some like reasonable, I mean I've been a journalist, right? So I've been working independently for many years, as well as in large sort of organizations that are committed to doing journalism. But going forward, it seems useful to be in a structured environment. At the same time, you know, what you're saying about being different is difficult within a sort of more corporate environment. Whether it's a law firm, whether it's some large institution, how do we navigate working with other people and get value out of it in some way? Because it's not an intuitive thing for me.
That's fair. So again, I think if you think the goal is skills acquisition, right? What are the skills you want to learn? And I'm going to talk in the rubric of the startup world because that's what I know. Starting up a company is hard. So I joined a startup called Sound Innovations. We had amazing technology. We had $10.7 million in the bank. We had a board made up of the former CEO of Red Hat and famous musicians, and we had no telephones and no business cards and no office. Okay, so when you ask like, what is the value of working with other people? What I found valuable working with an experienced entrepreneur is he sort of taught me the tools to start a business, because we started with a lot of money, but from ground zero. So everything from how do you order computers in a cost-effective way, how do you set up business cards, how do you do marketing, sales strategy, and he taught me a lot about financials. And again, I go back to wise people learn from other people, and smart people learn from their own experience. And I think you can accelerate your own professional development by finding great mentors in business or any other field, and just essentially sucking the knowledge you can out of them to further your own professional career.
Can you just speak a little bit more about the work that you do now and then what you like about it and what you dislike about it?
Sure. So again, we're about 225 employees across multiple companies. We have 8 in the exec team. So I'm technically in-house counsel. My boss is also a lawyer, but what he does is he sends me legal documents to draft and I send them back, and that's where we waste a lot of our day because no one wants to do that. But a lot of what I do, honestly, is solve problems. Okay, so let me give you kind of a plethora of business problems that I've had to face. We had a former employee who's sending kind of inappropriate messages to an accountant, and so we got to solve that, right? And it's not enough to have any sort of legal standing, but it's enough where it's an issue. One of our companies is losing $40,000 a month. Okay, so we need to turn that around. And what does that look like? So that's a business problem to solve. One of our other companies doesn't have the financials in place. Our investment bank has about 50 million in assets, which is small for an advisory bank, but enough where we have to think about, do we need to add more employees? Do we need to convert this into a separate entity? So these are kind of a lot of the questions we look into. Does that answer your question? So a lot of it's like leadership and logistics. I'll give you a challenge for me. Our internet marketing company hires a lot of guys out of college. And so it's less about their professional development and more about holding their attention. So I have to come up with challenges that both make sense financially or make sense from raising our PR value and keep them interested. So one challenge I gave them, which some of y'all might be interested in, is I asked them to figure out how to get a book on the New York Times bestseller list. And so they worked on it, didn't come up with an answer, worked on it, didn't come up with an answer, and then about 2.5 months ago we figured it out. So I know about 95% of what it takes to get on the New York Times bestseller list. Not saying that to brag, but it's actually pretty systematic, and that has to do a lot with how the publishing industry is structured as opposed to any sort of intelligence on our part. So that's kind of what we work on.
How do you evaluate business ventures?
So it's a great question. So one of the reasons I was hired is we have a small, at the time I was hired, it was about $2 million, and then by the time I got there, I took 100 days off and traveled the world. We had $3 million to put in angel investments, okay? When you look at whether to invest money, you're really looking at two things. You're looking at what is the total market potential here, and does this team have the ability to execute on that idea? There are books and books and books on stuff, but that's kind of how I narrow it. And then when I look at a team member, I actually look at a particular person and I ask them two questions. One, I want to know, can they do their job? And two, I want to ask, do they have the ability to do they believe that their teammates can do the job? Okay, so I'm interested in their confidence in the rest of the team. So that's kind of how we look at investments.
I was wondering if you could talk a little about some of the mistakes that you made coming out of law school and then moving into the business world, and that process of coming out with a JD, going to a law firm, and then moving into business. Do you think it's possible to come out with JD and then moving directly into business and those transitions?
So I'm going to answer those questions separately. I made a lot of mistakes in law school, and I think they're mistakes of omission as opposed to commission, right? So if I were in your seat today, you're one of?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I would think through, like, who are the 10 Yale Law alumni that you want to meet, and then come up with a process to how you can build and maintain relationships with them, right? I didn't do that, and that was a mistake. So it's something I've tried to learn from behind. So I sit on a board at Duke Law, I'm kind of going through it again, all that stuff, but who are the guys you want to meet and practice that? I mean, here's your chance to make mistakes, right? You have the advantage of, as a student, a lot of people will talk to you just because you're a student. So take advantage of that. Now, let me get to your next question. I think lawyers can be entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs can't be lawyers. Now, if you come out of law school and you pass the bar and you have a JD, I don't consider you a lawyer. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't think you have the functional ability to practice as an attorney, even though you have all the certifications. So I think going to a law firm, even if it's like a brief period of a year, is extremely valuable if you look at it not as a job and more as kind of a fourth year of law school. Because you can compress and learn a lot of knowledge in that year. So when I went, my goal was to learn as much about startup law as possible. How to start a company, what are the basic contracts that you have to put in place, agreements, financing. And so that's what I was trying to vacuum up. Can you go out straight? Sure, but it's really hard once you go into business to jump back into the law, right? Now, if you don't want to do law at all and you don't think that legal experience is valuable to your business, skip it and go straight to something you're passionate about.
Could you talk about how you transitioned from actually practicing to the business world?
Yeah, so I took 100 days off, which is how I was able to transition it. So I went to Israel, Ireland, India, and Jordan. I think the hardest thing when you're looking at law versus business is lawyers are extremely risk averse, and they look at the totality of the risk and they want to kind of mitigate every risk to the nuanced level. And entrepreneurs are the exact opposite of that. And so I found myself caught between two worlds, which was I didn't want to be so exacting on the risk front, but I also didn't want to, be a cowboy. I mean, I want to be reasonable. So the way I transitioned was really dedicating myself to learning the business before I formed an opinion. And I think that's hard, right? I mean, if you kind of, there's kind of a strange facet of modern society that everybody has an opinion on everything. Do you ever notice that? Like, how is that possible, right? Like, how do you have an opinion on heart surgery when you've never been I mean, it's just like crazy. So largely it was just kind of going in and saying, I'm just going to learn the business. I'm just going to listen, and then from there, trying to find a better way where I can add value to this entity and the company's control.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the value of a JD versus the value of an MBA for someone who's working at the intersection of law and business.
That's a great question. So I went through the personal analysis, and I took a couple courses at the business school, but not enough to be a full judge. A legal education is unique, so you can't really get it anywhere else. I think you can get a lot of an MBA education on your own, and that's the difference. So if you come from investment banking, if you come from consulting, you'll learn a lot of those courses. And again, it's about knowledge atrophies and what are the skills you're left with, right? If you're looking at it from a brand value perspective, does it help you? Maybe get your first job, but after that, it's just about execution anyway. So.
I wonder, sorry, what do you think about additional value of getting other professional certificates like CFA or CPA
practicing attorney?
I think they're extremely valuable because those, the ones you mentioned, kind of certify that you have a very specific skill set. And again, being able to read financials, no one wants to talk about it. It's extremely boring, but it's extremely valuable. Again, you're looking at kind of the lifeblood of a company. So if you can get any of those, you're going to be far ahead of any other JD.
You talked about like arranging financing for companies and connecting clients of your law firm with business ventures that you had a connection with. I guess, how did you identify clients who you thought might be interested? And also, I guess sort of goes along with my previous question, how much do you think about whether the company who you were trying to arrange funding for was viable, so as to avoid, trying to get funding for a company that might be a bust?
Okay, so I'm going to answer those questions in order. I think there's a book that every law student should read called The End of Lawyers. Don't worry about the dramatic title, but it's by Richard Susskind. The reason I think this book is valuable is it's talking about a lot of legal trends that are hitting the legal industry. And so let me summarize the thesis, which is the legal industry is so far behind on other forces that have hit other industries, and those forces are catching up just now. And one of them is technology. So let me get to answer your question. So how did I know who had money and who needed money? Well, what we found out was the best way to find that out was to build a database. And it was just to build a database of the connections within the law firm of people who had money and the startups that needed money. And so where I could add value was because I was interacting with a lot of startup communities. I was kind of flying around the country. So Boston, Silicon Valley, Madison, RTP, and to some extent Austin. I would go meet these entrepreneurs, find those companies, and my pitch was pretty simple. I said, listen, we got some people who've shown interest in financing. I don't know if they're interested in your company, but the least I can do is put you in a database. It's not going to cost you anything. So that was one way I was able to build kind of reputational cachet in the startup community. Now, it wasn't my job to evaluate whether a startup was a bust or not. That was the venture capitalist / angel investor's job. But one thing that my law firm did, which I thought was pretty clever, was they offered to match certain investment levels to show that they were sharing risk with the client. So sometimes it was 1-to-1 up to a certain point. And so clients love that because, first of all, no one likes paying legal bills. And so when they get a chance to kind of stick it to the lawyers where they lose money, the lawyers' money was great. But it also showed them that the lawyers were willing to play ball and kind of take the risk with them.
Sort of totally different topic, but can you talk about how much time you're putting in now or in the past, just how many hours a week? Like, how much hustling are you doing on the road?
Yeah. So it's kind of nice being in-house at a small business because I have a great boss who lets us control our schedule. So we get unlimited vacation, and my boss has one standard, which is just get the job done, and you can take as much time off as you want. But the flip side of a small business is that it's a circus. So, a lot of times I'm just going in and fixing problems, and we just don't have the quality standards in place or the personnel to anticipate major issues. So, there's a couple weeks where I'm not doing anything, and then there are a couple weeks that I'm just working all the time. Now, on the other front, kind of building a network. So I'll give you an example. I help out a party at J.J. Abrams' place. I'm not just name dropping how I got involved with that. It's through an organization called the U.S. Ireland Alliance. And so I don't have any personal interest in Hollywood. Like, I don't want to be in a movie. I'm not interested in financing a movie. I'm not interested in working on a movie. But one of the networking lessons I learned from a mentor of mine was it's really easy to make friends in industries where you are not involved. And the reason is someone will talk to you because they know you're not going to ask them for something. And so again, I think you have the advantage of the student is just go make friends in industries that you have no interest in because you never know when that's going to become valuable. And again, it's all about building the network before you need it. So I spend time doing that. Spend some time in Miami, going to go internationally a little bit, over to Milan, stuff like that.
I was wondering if you could talk about the process of building mentorships and also reaching out to people, sort of cold calling in a sense.
Yeah, so, and again, it's something I learned after my 2L year. and I wish someone had told me earlier, which is don't look for general mentors, look for mentors for things. Okay, so you have specific things you want to learn, specific problems in your character, and so look for mentors who can help you solve that. So this is actually a process I'm going through right now. I really would like to improve my writing. So I'm looking for a writing mentor. And really I'm looking for a story mentor. So what I found in business is one of the ways that you inspire people is you come up with stories, right? So where I'm interested now in Hollywood, again, this is the touch point, is maybe I can find someone who can help me write and speak stories. That's how I can inspire people to get action within our company. So let me give you kind of a step-by-step process. Again, this focus kind of actionable information. So what are the things you want to learn? And then who would be best to mentor you in those positions? And then you want to approach them, and I think you have a very, what I call, clean ask. So when I approach mentors, I tell them certain things. So I'll never ask you for money. I'll work around your schedule. I'll make sure you don't have to prepare anything. I'll bring the questions to you. And so the less work for that individual, the more likely they are to be your mentor. It's sort of the crux of it.
Awesome, I think that's good. We built this as ending at 7:10.
Okay.
It's like 7 o'clock, 7:10 now, so a little over. So why don't we end? I'll ask Keisha to hang around for a few more minutes if people want to just ask him personal questions and get contact information or whatever. And other than that, I think let's just thank Keisha for coming.
Hey, thanks guys.